So welcome to the Harvard Center for International Development's Road to GEM Friday Speaker Series. I am Marcel Momha, a student here at the Kennedy School in the Mid-Career Program, and I am a computer science engineer and an AI policy practitioner. Here at CID, our mission is to build a thriving world for all. We work across the university and a global network of researchers and practitioners to build an international pool of talent, convene academic and practitioner networks, to build an international and deploy breakthrough research to address the world's most pressing challenges. I just want to mention that today's event is co-organized with the AI Caucus and the Africa Caucus, two students' organizations here at HKS. Through our Road to GEM events this spring, we are taking a closer look at AI's influence on development. CID's annual Global Empowerment Meeting, GEM 25, the theme will be Catalyzing AI for Inclusive Change. And the event will be held on April 29th at the Harvard Business School. We are so excited about today's conversation on broadening perspectives on AI and data governance in Africa. Just to mention a few housekeeping items. Please enjoy your lunch. I'm happy that you already grabbed some food. And please help us as well, help the planet by doing your part. Everything you are using is compostable, so put it in the appropriate trash can. And please hold all questions for a speaker until she has finished her presentation and has opened the Q&A section. At the time, I will go around with a mic so we can hear you clearly. We are recording today's session, as you may have heard, which is on the record, but we'll keep the camera on the speaker only, ensuring that only voices from the audience will be recorded. Therefore, the video of the event will be available on the CID YouTube channel. And also CID team member may take photos of the event for use on CID's global social media channels. So if you are not comfortable with your photo being used this way, please let any of the CID team member know. And I think we also ask you to use the QR code to check in for this meeting, just to track attendance and cater future events for the audience. And finally, please make sure to subscribe to the CID's newsletter and follow Harvard CID on LinkedIn and Instagram to learn more about our events and stay connected with the CID community. So without further ado, I would like to briefly introduce you to our speaker today, Dr. Chinasa T. Okolo. She's a fellow at the Brookings Institution and a recent PhD student in computer science at Cornell. Congratulations. Her research focuses on AI governance in the Global South, datafication, and algorithmic marginalization, and the socio-economic impact of data work. In addition to her work at Brookings, Dr. Okolo serves as a drafting member of the Nigerian National AI Strategy, a consulting expert to the African Union AI Continental Strategy, an expert contributing writer to the International Scientific Report on the Safety of Advanced AI, and the editor-in-chief of ACM SIGACS, Computer and Society. Her research has been covered widely in media outlets and published at top-tier venues in human-computer interaction and social technical computing. So as you can see, she is very talented. And thank you very much for being here. It's a real pleasure and honor to have you. And over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Marcel. All right. And I just want to also just say another thanks to Marcel, again, for inviting me and leading and organizing for this, and then for also Crystal for all her help and helping with my travel arrangements. And so very happy to be here. As you mentioned, I'm Chinasa, a fellow at Brookings Institution. My research focuses on questions around AI and data governance and also human-centered AI. I'm particularly focused on the African continent, but I focus also on the global majority, also known as the global south or developing countries. So yeah, I'll get started into the presentation. Okay, cool. AI development and efforts towards regulating these systems are increasingly becoming centralized in Western countries, despite the impacts of AI transcending borders. Western corporations at the frontier of AI development are largely reliant on the African continent for natural resources like tantalum, cobalt, and tungsten, which form the GPUs that power large AI systems, also known as foundation models or frontier models. And human resources like data annotation and content moderation labor are also used to help refine these systems further. Given that Africa is seen as the next frontier for AI development, digital resources like data, which advance the capabilities of AI, will likely become the next commodity that's exploited by foreign entities, fueling a new era of neo-technocolonialism. These concerns around with issues of bias, disinformation, climate impacts, and economic inequality elevate a need for comprehensive and harmonized AI and data regulation efforts across the continent. This talk will examine both the burgeoning AI and data governance landscape in Africa, analyzing the impact of AI on democratic processes, outlining best measures for African participation in global AI governance, and also thinking about ways to improve and implement data policy reform. So I'll start off with a brief conversation that talks about some of the progress we've seen around AI in Africa. We've seen globally, however, that this AI development is centralized in countries like the United States, China, Canada, the UK, and also a lot of countries in the EU, European Union, like France, and Germany. Despite the historical barriers and also present-day challenges, researchers, developers, and grassroots organizations, and also startups have begun to emerge within the African continent to make notable progress in democratizing how AI is developed, who it's developed for, and then also who these technologies benefit. In many African countries, grassroots AI and machine learning communities have helped fill in access and capacity gaps of access or of training, getting access, to traditional AI and machine learning education, and also training in universities and also tertiary institutions. This has helped to increase participation from communities that have been underrepresented in AI development. Grassroots organizations like Masakane and Ghana NLP develop data sets and machine translation tools to help expand access to low-resource African languages. Efforts like Deep Learning Indaba, AI Saturdays Lagos, and Data Science Africa, amongst many others, have been instrumental in growing communities of AI researchers and developers within the continent. They form conferences, workshops, and also study groups to help advance the state of the art. Outside of natural language processing or NLP, specialized AI communities have also arisen. They focus on healthcare, like Sisonke Biotique in South Africa, and sustainability, like AfriClimate AI. More recently, AI and machine learning communities have also begun to arise in Francophone Africa, or West Africa, with AI Hub Senegal and also Khmer AI in Cameroon. And also Northern Africa, we see initiatives like Morocco AI, the Tunisian AI Society, and also Zaire AI in Algeria. AI research labs on the continent have also grown in prominence over the past decade, and many have been linked to the 2020 four-year $20 million AI for Development in Africa initiative that was funded by the Canadian International Development Research Center, also known as IDRC, and also the Swedish International Development Agency, also known as SIDA. Notable academic AI research labs have also begun to grow. We see some that include the AI and Data Science Research Lab at Makerere University in Uganda, the Data Science for Social Impact Lab at the University of Pretoria in South Africa, and also the AI and Robotics Lab at the University of Lagos in Nigeria. There's also a growing number of formal degree programs in AI and machine learning. This includes the African Master in Machine Intelligence, offered by the African Institute of Mathematical Sciences, also known as AIM. They have many campuses throughout the African continent, and also a recent MSc in AI that's offered by the University of Mauritius, and then also a Bachelor of Science in AI that's offered by Kumasi Technical University in Ghana. Over the past decade, the AI startup ecosystem within Africa has also expanded tremendously. While estimates on the number of AI startups that are operating within the continent vary, countries with thriving tech scenes like Nigeria, South Africa, and Egypt, among others, have also shown expansive growth in AI. There's also notable activity from emerging entrants in the AI ecosystem, which include countries like Zimbabwe, Cameroon, and Uganda. These startups are focused on a range of domains and applications, including in healthcare, language generation, robotics, and others, and they promise to help bridge some of the innovation gaps and capacity gaps, and it's also solved some of the traditional development issues we see. According to Startup List Africa, 85 AI startups on the continent have reached a cumulative funding of almost $260 million in USD. And with the top 10 startups commanding $238 million and the top 3 commanding $207 million. Insideep, which is a notable, I would say, AI startup or company actually on the continent, they're no longer a startup. They focus on decision-making AI systems for biology, logistics, and electrical design, and also energy. They actually are one of the most successful, if not the most successful AI startup or company on the continent, or to come out of Africa in general. It was founded in Tunisia in 2014 and acquired by BioNTech, a German pharmaceutical company, in 2023 for $680 million. Insideep has more than 400 employees across the world at offices in London, Paris, Berlin, Tunis, Lagos, Cape Town, Boston, and San Francisco. Research data produced from AfriLabs, which is a network organization that supports innovation centers across African countries, and analyzed by Techaball, which is a Pan-African tech publication, shows that over 50% of African AI startups are just in 7 countries. As the AI ecosystem within the continent grows, it will be essential that AI services that are built on the continent include Africans from a diverse set of backgrounds and also regions. So now I'll go into some of the AI ecosystem challenges that we see throughout the continent. Traditional challenges with infrastructure, education, digital literacy, and unequal access to ICT, or information and communication technologies, have impacted the African continent for decades. The rapid adoption and also burgeoning interest in AI globally has amplified these challenges, creating an AI divide on top of the already existing digital divide. This highlights serious implications for the advancement of AI in Africa. Given the large amounts of data that are needed to train AI systems and the high number of computing resources that are consumed in this process, infrastructure challenges affecting African countries is a significant barrier to developing, implementing, and also even adopting AI systems. Limited internet penetration in Africa can be largely attributed to infrastructure challenges that include inadequate access to electricity and insufficient investments in components for internet infrastructure. This includes fiber optic cables, cellular towers, and also base stations. Africa also particularly struggles with internet access, but however, in the last decade, we've seen a lot of progress. According to the ITU, the International Telecommunications Union, in the last decade, internet access or accessibility in the continent has risen from an estimated 8% in 2011 to 36% in 2021. Fortunately, plans are underway to begin increasing this amount of access to internet. This is one step that is essential to ensuring that African countries can equitably participate in AI research and development, along with providing basic access to digital resources and technologies. To Africa, which is the longest subsea internet cable ever designed, is currently under deployment and has 46 connections to land-based networks across 33 countries within Africa, Asia, and Europe. However, internet and electricity infrastructure are only one aspect of a successful AI ecosystem. African countries also lag in digital literacy, AI talent, and having access to accessible and relevant data sets. According to the World Bank, out of all world regions, Sub-Saharan Africa has the lowest percentage of citizens that are equipped with digital skills. This equals to about half of the average level of digital skills adoption that we see worldwide. Thus, to ensure that AI is accessible to broader, non-technical populations across the continent, there's a need to distill these topics for various audiences, and also to develop culturally relevant content. There's also a need to ensure gender and age inclusion and parity in these respective initiatives, to ensure that women, youth, and older adults can benefit equitably from access to AI, and also even participating in AI development if they choose. Globally, we see that African countries also rank low in their respective ability and concentration to produce and contribute generally to AI development, and also particularly research. These numbers rapidly diminish when we consider the concentration of top-tier AI researchers who are considered to be, by Macro Polo, it's kind of like a think tank, these are considered to be researchers who publish at top machine learning and AI conferences like ICML, NeurIPS, iClear, KDD, and et cetera. These researchers who are producing this top-tier AI research and submitting to getting accepted to these conferences are also primarily concentrated within the United States and China. However, there's research that's published within a Harvard Business Review that shows that Johannesburg, Lagos, and Nairobi are also quickly becoming AI talent hotspots within the continent. However, there's not a lot of research that's really investigating if universities within these respective countries or cities are actually, being able to produce and engage in these top-tier AI research venues. Along with investing in cloud computing infrastructure, governments in Africa must also build the capacity to train local researchers and developers to help expand their respective AI ecosystems. And so I'll talk about some issues around brain drain, which is a big issue within the African continent and other countries within the global majority, especially in fields like healthcare, but also we've seen this happen in tech. Given the unstable political environments and economies in some regions of Africa, efforts to train and retain AI talent could be hampered if this brain drain continues to increase. The 2021 Africa Developer Ecosystem Report by Google estimates that about 38% of African developers work in Africa for a company with its headquarters outside of the continent. This trend could also follow for AI jobs. It's essential that as AI talent is trained within these countries, that they are also encouraged to stay and contribute to the local economies. There should also be effort to support local entrepreneurship, research, and innovation in AI. So I'll now get into the main part of this presentation, which will talk about AI and data governance within the African continent. Over the past year, let's say like past 2 years, now that it's 2025, we've seen a lot of efforts, particularly within both the AI and the data governance space, a lot of it more focused on AI because it's the hot topic at the moment. We've seen lots of efforts from individual countries like Nigeria and Benin in developing their respective AI strategies, also with Kenya being one of the most recent countries on the continent to do so. Just to provide a little bit of a primer on AI governance. So according to the Carnegie Council for Ethics and International Affairs, AI governance is a set of rules, regulations, ethical and technical frameworks, and similar mechanisms that guide the development and deployment of AI technologies. Data governance is also an essential aspect of AI governance, along with other areas like privacy, for example, as it provides protections over how personal information is collected, stored, transferred, and used, while enabling data subjects control over their information and also the right to be informed about data breaches. Given the fundamental role of data in training machine learning models and also implementing AI systems, and also refining these systems overall, This enacting data governance will be fundamental to ensuring that AI can be effective and also safe and fair for communities. We've also seen across the continent that the increasing development and adoption of AI, not just within the continent, but just in general, has dramatically shifted practices around data. This has spurred the development of new industries and also revealed new forms of exploitation. I'm sure many people saw that over the past year or so, or even just a couple months, that companies have been rapidly revising their terms of conditions or terms of services to allow data to be collected, from your respective profiles or accounts, to be used to train generative AI models. Within African countries, we see that these issues definitely can have more severe consequences, given the lack of enforcement on existing data privacy policies, and also given the rest of the countries that don't, have these respective policies in place. Thus, this elevates the need for comprehensive governance and also enforcement measures. Approximately 38 out of 55 African Union member states, this includes 54 African countries, and also the disputed territory of Western Sahara, they have enacted formal data protection regulations. 15 out of 38 of these were passed within the last 5 years, and also 26 out of 38 of these were enacted in the last decade. The first data protection law in Africa was enacted by Cabo Verde in 2001, and data protection laws were actually recently enacted by Malawi in June 2024, and also in Ethiopia in July 2024. As of October, or as of, this month, Namibia, South Sudan, and the Gambia have drafted data protection laws that are still yet to be enacted. And so hopefully we get to see some progress on this over the next year or so. Along with country-specific data governance regulations, regional economic communities, also known as RECs, and also continental-wide entities like the African Union have introduced data protection acts. The AU Malabo Convention, which is also known as the African Union Convention on Cybersecurity and Personal Data Protection, was ratified in June of 2023. This actually happened 9 years after its original adoption. And so hopefully, we don't see the same progress or the same trend happen with the AU AI Continental Strategy, which I'll talk about next. It was drafted in 2011, and then at the 17th Ordinary African Union Summit that happened in Malabo, which is in Equatorial Guinea, which is where the name comes from, and then adopted by the AU in 2014, and then finally entered into force on June 8th, 2023. There's also been regional efforts, towards data protections that I mentioned previously from RECs, and these have been implemented, by ECOWAS, which is the Economic Community of West African States, the Southern African Development Community, SADC, and also the East African Community. At the moment, there have been no regional governance measures proposed or enacted by the Arab Maghreb Union, the Community of Sahel-Saharan States, and also the Economic Community of Central African States. And also with some of the recent conflict on the continent, we do, understand that there have been countries that have left ECOWAS, for example, and I don't think these respective countries also have data protection laws. And so I think it'll be really important, to ensure sufficient protections. And this is where the AU comes in as well. And at the moment overall, we also see that only 25 out of 55 African Union member states have a policy, strategy, plan, or guideline on AI. And this research is from the African Observatory on AI. These efforts could include a ministerial or presidential declaration or statement, or even a full-blown strategy, like we see from Mauritius, for example. While countries like Benin, Egypt, Mauritius, Kenya, Nigeria, and Senegal have developed national AI strategies, Rwanda is actually the only country within the African continent that has introduced a formal AI policy. However, it's yet to be fully enacted. However, the government of Rwanda is actually hosting a continental-wide AI summit on Africa later this year in April. And so I'll be in attendance and also hoping to see some big announcements there as well. However, overall, we do see a lot of, say, relatively slow progress. And I say relatively, like it's very, light in a way because, again, there's only technically one entity in the world, which is the EU, that has implemented AI regulation. And so, in my opinion, Africa or African countries aren't necessarily lagging, but I think there could be, much more progress in addressing some of these issues as well. And so now, to talk about the AU AI continental strategy, we see that the AU African Union has, taken a big step in this, and I've been fortunate to be involved in this effort over the past 3 years or so. The AU AI continental strategy aims to provide guidance to African countries to harness AI to meet their respective development needs. This also aims to help improve the well-being of its people while promoting ethical use, minimizing potential risk, and also leveraging opportunities for AI development. The AU Executive Council endorsed the Continental AI Strategy during its 45th Ordinary Session at Accra last year in July, and then it was formally released on August 9th. It's expected to be formally endorsed also, or fully endorsed by the AU heads of state at the AU Summit happening next month. So now, to kind of wrap up the presentation, I'll talk about some AI policy opportunities that I see for the respective continent. And given that there's so many different challenges, particularly when we think about the policy fragmentation and also the limited capacity for enforcement and actually implementing some of these policies, we see that AI poses a range of challenges for governance within Africa, along with some of the other issues around governance and corruption, unfortunately, that we see. And so I'm looking forward to digging into some things I think that could be helpful. So now we see that the purported benefits of AI have promised to help many African countries and also others in the global majority fast track quote unquote development, and also to reach the SDGs, which I think along with many other people that we're still very much far behind on. However, we see that these technologies come with many risks, and some which have been realized in many African countries and also have been impacting different African communities. Additionally, concerns regarding the negative impacts of AI have also led to a wide array of research investigating its impact in fields like healthcare, employment, and policing. Unfortunately, a lot of this research is not necessarily focused on the African continent, and this gives us a limited view of how AI could harm these respective populations. We also see that many African countries, are dealing with existing development challenges and also have priorities that supersede the need to even think about developing AI and also implementing AI regulation. We see things like, developing social services, tackling insecurity, even planning for climate change, along with building infrastructure and fighting corruption, actually, in my opinion, take precedence over regulating AI. However, because AI is becoming so embedded in many different aspects of our daily lives, for those that are in, Western countries and also even in global majority countries, it's imperative that African governments make efforts towards developing regulations and also effectively implementing them. And so some work that I've done over the past year that was published and presented at the Data for Policy conference talked about some of the issues that we see in African countries meeting their respective technological potential. And so these include either weak or insufficient data protection regimes, such as in Mauritius. We see also complications in achieving robust oversight frameworks that aim to support sustained sector growth, such as in Kenya and Egypt. And then also we see that there's limited governance and also economic resources to devote to technological focused workforces, particularly when we think about technology like AI. And Angola is a really interesting case because they actually just opened up a multi-million-dollar center that is actually funded by the national oil company, Sonangol, and is specifically focused on technologies in that respective sector. And so while it's AI may not necessarily be a priority for the country of Angola, for example, I think that there are ways to understand how priorities for example, improving oil capacity can be aided or improved by leveraging AI technologies. So I'll talk about some of the current indicators that we see in terms of things that could actually help improve efforts towards effective AI and data governance across the continent. However, we do see, again, along with many of the challenges I mentioned, I think that these could provide, potential steps to improve some of these issues that we see. And so first off, thinking about how to strengthen data and computing infrastructure. Again, I think this is an issue that, many countries outside of the continent also, face challenges with. And also, I think because of the respective climate impacts of data centers, they have to be taken in a cautious approach. And so I think, of course, in my opinion, a lot of the efforts towards, improving AI capacity could actually help with, again, some of the development challenges we see. So while, developing stable electrical grids is good for developing AI, it's also good in general for giving people access to light. Along with, again, expanding the access to telecommunications infrastructure, and then also establishing national and regional computing clusters, which could actually be very helpful for advancing academic AI research or just technical research throughout the continent. And then when we think about increasing regional and continental cooperation, this is something I've been thinking about, particularly in terms of data governance, because we do still see a lot of gaps in that place. In this respective issue or area. And I think that, regional economic communities, along with the African Union, can actually play a big role in covering some of the gaps, especially when we think about countries that have been affected by conflict and haven't necessarily had the opportunity to develop or make progress towards either both AI and data governance. And this includes countries, like the DRC, for example, and also Eritrea, along with many others. And then obviously, enhancing AI and data governance. This, would kind of, I would say, follow, from the increasing regional and continental cooperation, and thinking about, systematizing these regulatory efforts and also improving pathways to incorporate their respective expertise that already is within these African countries. I've been fortunate to travel across the continent over the past couple years and work closely with people and stakeholders in the AU. And there's a lot of I would say skill sets and talent that can be leveraged by governments to help improve their respective capacity to draft and implement AI legislation. And then obviously, we think about expanding AI education and employment, and thinking about, again, I think that expanding or revamping existing educational systems will not only benefit the respective AI ecosystems, but also have a trickle down a positive effect in many other areas as well. Again, and then or continuing from that, I think there are also many opportunities to improve formal AI training opportunities. And, because many African countries, or particularly those like Kenya, have been involved in AI from like a lower level, thinking more so content moderation, data annotation, I think there are many more opportunities for, professionals and students in these countries to develop or to contribute to developing AI models, which is essentially where like the socioeconomic value in AI is, alongside from the infrastructure, because we see how well NVIDIA is doing. And then again, for me, I'm also very, I would say, passionate about African countries having the opportunity to accelerate fundamental AI research, and especially academic research, because in the US, we've seen how essential it's been and I would say in building up the AI ecosystem, and also thinking about opportunities to fund research scholars to stay in their respective countries. And I always point to Google because, when Sergey and Larry were students at Stanford, they were supported by National Science Foundation, GRFP. And I think that there are many opportunities to kind of replicate that throughout different African countries. And I will say that South Africa has definitely done a really good job in supporting AI research and also even developing centers across the country within different academic institutions. And so finally, wanted to think about improving public engagement, which I think is very essential to improving awareness of AI technologies and also improving this adoption and effective implementation of governance or of policies. And so, governments must implement effective pathways for the public to comment and provide input on these respective governance frameworks or just other things that are proposed, and then also even allowing the public to play a big role in this policy development. All right, and so going again to like the closer into the presentation, the digital ministries in Africa actually are playing a very big role, in helping advance many of the priorities we see around AI and data governance. And ministers have actually played also like a prominent role in being engaged in a lot of these global conversations, at convenings like the series of AI summits, AI safety summits. There's actually a summit happening in about a week and a half or so in Paris, and I'll also be there. So I'm looking forward to having more conversations, with African governments and ministers about how to, move effectively towards AI governance as well. So we're at the end of the presentation, and I think, again, there are many opportunities for African countries as they grapple with the potential benefits of AI to understand how they can also be cautious in building, implementing, and governing these technologies. AI should not be seen as a band-aid or even like just a panacea for solving development issues. There should be equitable investments by countries towards building capacity for traditional social services, while also making efforts to build sustainable AI ecosystems. There's to work towards these goals. African countries must also invest in international collaboration and also in cooperating with each other on the continent, and also leveraging the respective expertise within the respective countries. So I want to thank you all for being here today and listening to the presentation, and happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Chinasa. That was very enlightening. And okay, they're already hands up. So we go straight to the Q&A. Be direct, ask your question, and there won't be any follow-up question. So
Thank you very much for this very insightful presentation. My question is about financing. So what kind of funds can you tap into? Does it fall under development funds or maybe climate funds, SDG funds? Thank you.
Funds to accelerate AI governance development in Yeah, so there's actually been a lot of interest, from multilateral institutions to help African countries, say, like advance their AI and data governance. And so, for example, for the Nigeria National AI Strategy Workshop that happened last April, I believe there was funding from Meta, UNESCO, Amidyar, and it was a mix of multilateral institutions, also UNDP, philanthropic organizations, and also tech companies. And so I think that this could, definitely help with some of the issues around financing. I think that I am a little bit wary of tech companies because we've seen, particularly in the US, their influence in stalling data privacy regulation. And so I think that there has to be, again, a balance in ensuring that they don't, let's say, over influence or even negatively influence how data or even AI governance benefits their respective use cases. So.
Thank you. My question, do you think Africa is playing catch up when it comes to AI? And because AI implementation and how that aligns with key priorities for countries, there's a huge disconnect. Because I also see that, is this a priority?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, throughout the presentation, I've, been trying to be cautious in how I approach mentioning, how African governments should be involved in AI development and also even governance themselves, because I'm very wary of the climate impacts. And we've also seen that, African countries, along with others in the global majority, have been negatively impacted or disproportionately impacted by climate change. And we know that developing AI drives negative climate impacts. And so, again, I think that because there's been so much hype and investment, I also mentioned that, at the end of the day, even if Africa does not necessarily become a significant AI player, because they receive so many investments, we would hopefully have stable electrical grids, improved educational systems, also improved, startup ecosystems outside of AI. And because, again, we're kind of also in a bubble too, I think that it'll be, in a way, a bit too late to catch up. And so, again, I think that there will be these positive trickle-down effects of this, again, hype of AI that will hopefully impact Africa positively. So, yeah.
My question pertains to the education system in Africa and talent. So how, and maybe you have this answer to this question, but I'm very curious of the strategy of recruiting new talent into the field of AI. What does that look like right now?
I'm not based on the content, so I will try to like do my best to see how I can answer this question, because a lot of the work that I see is being done by these grassroots communities. And so these are people, they may not, they're most likely like not necessarily working directly in AI. They may be, a lot of them are students at universities, master students, PhD students, or even just like professionals working in other fields as like, or just general fields like software engineering that have this interest in AI. And so I think there are not necessarily like traditional pipelines or like pathways that we see like in the US, so for people with me with computer science degrees, like, most of us are actually going into industry, aside from like academia or think tanks like where I'm based. And we don't see that pipeline happening in the African context. And I actually don't think that it has to be that way, because you don't necessarily need a computer science degree to develop AI systems, or even a PhD, let's say, to develop these respective AI systems. And so I think that like these communities, and also even the growing amount of master's programs offer like different pathways. And I think AIMS, which is the African Institute for Mathematical Sciences, they've actually like played a big role in improving, I would say, like this pipeline that we see, but also because there isn't a lot of, let's say, like native AI growth, or like a growth by like local startups that are influencing the AI ecosystem. Just to like clarify, companies like Google and Microsoft and IBM actually have a big presence within like the AI ecosystem within Africa, and also just like the tech ecosystem. And so a lot of the, I would say, like fundamental work that I see is coming from these respective companies. But again, like there are entrants like Lilapa AI, which is in South Africa, that have been developing small language models for South African and other African languages as well. And I think, again, they're still a small player, but I think that there's a lot of potential to improve this respective ecosystem. So, yeah. Mm.
My question is about AI and ethics. So how far the AI technology respect African tradition, local identity?
Yeah, when we think about, popular systems like ChatGPT, for example, and others, like Claude, Gemini, Bard, etc., we see that they embody the values and ideals of the developers at these respective companies. And, again, because, African communities and even those in other global majority countries are not seen as like the target consumers for these technologies, we see like less prioritization of including African languages in these systems. And even if they do include African languages, they actually perform like very poorly on them. And when we think about the values and cultures, I would say like there's even less prioritization or incentive for these companies to include, I would say, like these concepts, or I would say these values in their system. So yeah, it's very bad. But again, like I think there are African organizations like Ghana NLP, for example. They have developed chatbots for African languages, or for Ghanaian languages like Twi, and other, excuse me. And then also Lesan AI in Ethiopia has developed chatbots that have been used by Ethiopian communities as well. So I think that we have to focus on our African communities, have to focus on developing like for their own, because there is an audience. And I think, they are gradually like getting these resources to prioritize on their respective communities.
Thank you for being here. I just wanted to ask with regards to, obviously data is at the center of AI. And it took us so long to even ratify the Malabo Convention. And even then, it's not all African countries that have ratified it. So there's this major gap that comes with regards to data protection across the African continent. I'm just wondering, given that it's taken us so long, I don't know if it was with a lack of will or whatever it was, when you look at AI and coming in now with AI regulation at a continental level, there's a big, do you see the possibility of African countries really implementing this? Or is this another thing that we sign and we actually struggle to implement?
Honestly, like, just given the state of, different issues in the continent, I would say I see similar things happening. I don't think it's actually going to take as long, for the AU AI continental strategy to let's say like be ratified, because there's been like just such a very high global interest in AI. However, the presidents of South Africa and DRC, or no, excuse me, of Kenya are fighting on Twitter, and I think that this definitely kind of detracts, from in a way from like just like the potential that we have in improving AI or AI governance within the continent. But again, I think, it's just a mixed bag. It's really hard to say, because I think the AU has a lot to improve as well, because I didn't mention this in the presentation, but there are actually two AU AI continental strategies, because AutoNetPath, which is a development agency of the AU, which was where I was working with, we launched our AI strategy in February of last year. And then when we saw the AI strategy that was released in August, it was actually very different, because they had another set of people working on this. And this was from like the energy agency or infrastructure agency, which I'm not sure why they would be involved, because the AU actually has a directorate that's focused on science and technology. So anyways, so I think like, we do see like, again, some of these coordination issues affecting the AU specifically. And so that's why like, it's been very hard for me to like answer this like clearly, but I don't think it's going to take as long, but it still be as difficult, I would say.
Yeah, no, can I? Yeah, thank you so much for being here. Quite a stimulating presentation. And I want to just first of all acknowledge the fact that this is evolving and everybody is playing catch up, not just Africa, even the West. They're grappling with, this evolving dynamics with AI. I guess I'm just curious about the public engagement aspect that you mentioned. How does it work for our own people?
Yeah, I would say civil society will actually play a big role, particularly within the African context, because there was a really interesting video I watched, a YouTube video a couple months ago, where someone went into refugee camps in Kenya and asked people about AI. And I think some of the like younger refugees knew about it, and also they went out into like the public as well, like shopkeepers and stuff. But again, like, if you ask the average person, like even what we consider like the average person, like in the entire world, separate from the average person in Africa, like they're not going to know about AI, because I think we're so, let's say, like surrounded by it, like, being in the US, which is like the heart of AI development and like tech development in general, that, like we are inundated by ChatGPT and, other tools. And so going back to like the main, what I'm trying to say is that there have been organizations in Africa, like Research ICT Africa, which is a think tank research organization in South Africa, and Policy with 2 L's in Uganda, that have been leading a lot of these public efforts on thinking about the ethical harms and also like gender harms of AI. And I think they've been leading workshops on these topics. And however, I don't think, again, like a lot of it is trickling down to like, just like the lay person on the street. But again, I think that the government also has to play a big role in funding these organizations to improve this outreach as well. So, yeah.
Thank you for your presentation. I was intrigued by the comment you made about there being two or simultaneous strategies being developed at the AU level. Is it possible that one of them is aligned with a GIZ EU AI model, because the GIZ has been sponsoring a number of AI strategy developments in Africa? And related to that, there have been some criticisms that the EU has deployed legislation a bit too early, and especially has deployed a risk-based model in a space that, or for a phenomenon that is fast evolving, undefined, and fitting more in the realm of uncertainty than in a structured, well-understood, well-defined, identified risk-based space. And for Africa, where we are still at a very nascent stage, looking for the opportunity elements because of the opportunity to gain the transformational outcomes should we be running headlong quickly into a constraining, limiting governance framework versus a more exploratory approach? Thanks.
Yeah, so for the first part, there was actually, so there's an interesting MIT Technology Review article. It's titled like what Africa needs to do to become a major player in AI. So they talk about these issues with the dual AI strategies. And one of my colleagues who I was working with on the original one mentioned that there was actually a lot of influence from, I believe, I guess like they outsourced the work to like a Swedish consultant or something like that. So I think there is like this influence, from these respective development agencies on negatively, positively, on like the AI governance development or strategy development. And then for the second part, I think for the EU, it's also interesting because I believe I've mentioned data governance a lot because I believe their work towards GDPR was actually fundamental, and then in the EU developing like the AI Act because again like data privacy is fundamental to AI, and so however the EU AI Act isn't perfect, and because it focuses on risk. Which I believe have also been like kind of overblown in a little bit because we've had a lot of like discourse from AI doomers who are saying like, okay, AI is going to like, wipe out humanity. It's like an existential threat, et cetera, which is very, in my opinion, like overblown and also like false because humans are still very much involved, like manually and physically, in developing AI systems and even like implementing them. And so because of this approach to like risk-based approach, I think like it definitely like it's a kind of lessens the potential impact that the framework or the regulation, can have. And then also because very explicitly, like the EU Act does not, provide provisions for regulating AI, for migrants, and which is, a very big issue within Europe, and also some of these like more human rights based issues. I think that this is also, I would say like a negative or like a less strong aspect of the EU AI Act, and I think that we should approach AI more so from regulating AI from a human rights approach, rather than like a risk approach, because we see that it provides a bit more comprehensive, obviously, protections on limiting harms of these respective systems. So yeah.
Thank you so much for your presentation. In some of your past research, you've asked how to make AI explainable to novice technology users in the Global South, and I was wondering if you've kind of come to any further conclusions on that or any solutions, and if there are any applications of AI that have adequately addressed this problem in their context.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's my dissertation work. I haven't really got back to it because I think that explainable AI itself is also like it's a really big issue because my work just basically showed that these concepts are more explainable or understandable by those with technical knowledge, so like the developers themselves rather than the end users. And so I did field work in India, in Uttar Pradesh, and I was working with community healthcare workers to see how like these methodologies, when we incorporate explainable AI into prototypes, like how it actually impacts their respective understanding of how like AI systems work. And again, I don't think that there is a good explanation to this, but for me, I actually, towards the end of my dissertation work, kind of lean toward the idea of interpretability. And so essentially, if we make AI systems inherently explainable, then we actually don't have to add like these explainability methods as kind of like an add-on, because one, they actually add more complexity to models, which will increase like the compute cost needed. And then again, like they don't work for the average person. And so I haven't really got back to that training research, but I think there are ways that developers and companies like have to work towards actually engaging more non-technical populations to understand like what do they need explained from AI, and then also like how best to do this for them. So
I think this will be the last question.
Thank
you. Thank you for your inspiring presentation. My question is from the social equality. We think the AI pose relatively more like challenges or burdens on vulnerable groups like people in older age in rural areas, less developed regions, or will this thus increasing the digital gap or creating another kind of inequality?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we see that AI is essentially exacerbating existing social inequalities, along with some of the issues around the digital divide, which I mentioned previously. So I only expect this to continue because not even so because of lack of regulations, but because of the lack of safeguards that people are don't have or they have when they're implementing AI, because it's kind of being implemented like recklessly, in my opinion. For example, there have been different governments that have implemented like AI-based systems that have tried to improve or streamline like the social benefit disbursement process. In some cases, have actually falsely accused a lot of people of like stealing social benefits, and in this case, like led to like suicides and deaths of people, and even like actually negative outcomes for families. And this has actually happened in a couple countries. I think this Australia, some in Europe. I can't remember the name. Sorry, of the respective countries. But again, because of this like AI hype, we're seeing like again like these discontinued exacerbation of like harms on marginalized communities, and because these communities again are not represented in AI development, and also even in the data sets that are being used to train these systems. Like it's basically kind of like a never-ending cycle at this moment. And it's hard for me to say like if regulation will effectively like address these issues, but I am not sure that it will. So we'll see. We'll see. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think she deserves a good round of applause. And thank you very much, Dr. Okolo, for this brilliant presentation. And thank you also for the questions. And right after this session, we'll have a career chat, or just to further the conversation and know more also about her work, her research. And everybody's welcome is at Perkins conference room. So you are all welcome. And Dr. Okolo, just a small souvenir of your trip here.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And thank you so much. We also appreciate you coming. And thank you very much for coming to this event. And see you in just 15 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, how's it going? Good.